And we are live. It is Friday, May
Hello.
17th, and it is currently about 11:20 a.m. here in LA. Cole, whose um, camera or his view, your view is a little off right now in this
That's all
format.
down to you. That's all down to
How
you.
are you doing, Cole? What time is it over there in
It
Dublin?
is 7:20 p.m.
Okay.
And I learned recently you guys don't really use military hours, do you? In when you refer to time. Like we don't say 1920, but if all our phones would say, 1920 in the PM, do your guys' phones do that?
No,
Strange thing to
no. I
start
mean,
this off with.
you can
Yeah.
set it up to do that, but I
Yeah.
do
It's
not
not a common thing
understand
there.
military time. I mean, I understand it, but then I always have to do an
Mm.
extra calculation in my head to figure out like I have to convert it, right? So
Yeah.
I don't. So what's
Right.
the point of like if someone tells me like 2020, like I then have to convert that like, oh, it's 8:20, but
Good year.
it's not. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not natural to us. So
Mm.
anyway, it's been a crazy week, a crazy busy week, or actually last couple weeks, which is why we missed. This was supposed to be a weekly live stream, but now we are. We missed last Friday, so that's because I've been on a deadline, and you've been super busy as well.
Hmm.
But yeah, but the deadline is people might have noticed like we're publishing a little bit more slowly as well on the site. It's because we're working on a big project for Cartoon Brew, um, and so it
Oh,
was it was oh well that's three guests. Let's go to two.
yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Ta-da. You should give yourself a round of applause there.
There we go. Let's see.
Yeah.
That never gets old. So yeah, but one thing we mentioned when we published our 20th anniversary post
Mm.
back a few months ago. Let me try to get to it here. Uh, this was announced back in March. Is that we were gonna start a biannual print edition, and that's what
Yeah.
we've been working on right now for the past few weeks, and it's gonna go to print soon. So we're very excited about that.
Now, you've talked a bit before about the annual or the print edition and why it's nice to have something tactile. We said it on previous streams. But I think it seems like in a digital age, it seems like a bit of a folly, right? It doesn't seem like to be the best thing in the world. So tell me, when did the idea come to you? This is I'm curious. Like, what was the
Mhm.
early steps for this?
I think it stretches back that we knew this year was going to be our 20th anniversary for the site,
Hmm.
and when a lot of people do anniversary kind of events for companies or publications or anything, they tend to be very kind of inward looking and kind of patting yourself on the
Hmm.
back, like, oh, you did a great job, and so the challenge was I wanted to do something special. Print seems always a little bit more special, a little bit more permanent than a website. And I love print.
Hmm.
I've done magazines before and books, so I wanted to do print, but I also didn't want it to be inward looking. So it was this
Mm.
process of what can we do that actually adds to the community, that creates something new for the community, but is also celebratory and is for our anniversary. And so we came up with this idea that rather than just publish about ourselves, we were going to do an annual power list for the animation
Mm.
industry, so we can
Mm.
celebrate the powerful people in the business who are creating change, who are driving the art form forward, who are driving the business forward. And so it's not really about us at all. This first issue, it's gonna be, we're doing it twice a year,
Mm.
and the first issue is going to be the power list. That's going to be annual. Every June, we're starting to do a power list for Cartoon Brew. It's this year it's 60 people, and it's only for the
Wow.
U.S. animation industry. It's not a global power list because that would take years to put together to who's powerful
Mm.
around the world. But for the U.S., this has taken us months to do, and we've surveyed hundreds of people, and we've worked with all the studios, and we've put together this amazing list that I think is gonna be really eye opening for a lot of people.
Hmm. Tell me a bit about the process of putting the list together. Then, like you said, you sent out surveys.
Yeah. We
What was the
start
kind of catchment range?
we what was the what?
The catchment, like who's is it
Okay.
like a vote? Is it just people submitting who they want on
Yeah.
it? Like how does it work?
Yeah, we asked for people's top picks, people who
Mm.
are throughout the industry in positions of prominence, creators, directors, top artists, producers, executives, studio owners. It was the whole
Yeah.
gamut of people that we sent this out to, and everybody could nominate people that they felt were, belonged on this list. It's a list
Mm.
of people who wield influence in this industry, and in Hollywood, power is a very important thing, and in animation, less so. But nevertheless, we want. Well, no, I mean, people don't go into animation to accumulate power, right? Like
Mm.
Hollywood has a different standard of power, and in animation, we're not as obsessed with it. And for that reason, Hollywood had, like, 20 different power lists that come out every year. Animation has not had one since the 1990s. Animation Magazine used to do a power list, and then there hasn't been one in the last 20 years. And so,
Mm.
how do we actually talk about the industry and understand it better if we're not even looking at, who's driving it forward, right? So this is
Yeah.
this is kind of like a guide to the industry, that these are the people that are pushing the
Mm.
art form and the industry forward in the United States in 2024.
Yeah. I'd be curious, and this is I'll throw it out to the chat because we love interacting with the chat. But I'd be curious to know who they think should be on the list, right? Or like what their kind of picks would be, because this is something that if you're reaching out to people, this is obviously something that becomes very subjective, right? It's subjective based on who uh, is sending back the list, but then you're curating everything to an objective list, right?
it, it
Was
it's
there a deadline
it's still
getting these back?
it's still subjective, right? Power is
Yeah.
subjective. So at the
Mm.
end of the day, it's been extremely difficult to, figure out, who's more powerful. Now, one of the things that we did that I think was an interesting idea is a lot of the lists are ranked and a lot of them are unranked. We actually ranked people from 1 to 60, and that made it really interesting because it was an exercise that forced you to think, like, is this person
Yeah.
more powerful than this person, and then what does that even mean? Because we
Yes.
we, we
Yeah.
looked at both our creative and executives and management together. They're in the same list. So what
Mm.
what does it mean? Like, how is an artist more powerful than an executive? Like, they're doing different things, but nevertheless, it's a useful kind of thought exercise. It's been really challenging to kind of rank people in this fashion, but it's going to get much more interesting in next year, because the list is, people are going to go up and down on the list, and
Mm.
so it's going to be a really interesting kind of snapshot of where the industry is every single year.
Yeah. I guess this is a kind of a nebulous question, but how are you guys defining power then? I say you guys. I've not
It,
seen
it,
the list, by the way, everyone. I don't know who's on it, but
yeah.
how are you defining the power within that list? Like, what
Pa-
does that mean? Is it
I
influence
I
or?
think power is really. I mean, for me, power is influence, right?
Uh,
When you have the capacity to say, I want to do something, and then to have other people follow you along, whether it's your employees, or whether you're a director, or whether you're a show creator, or whether you're in a position of of an organization, right? But to have
mm,
people, I mean, power is really influence, right? And a lot of people accumulate power through, doing amazing work, and
yeah.
showing, the way, right? But then some people accumulate power through fear, and so there's different ways of achieving power,
Uh oh.
but
Uh
yeah. what
oh.
but you know what, that's more, this is what I discovered when we did this,
Yeah.
is that happens in Hollywood a lot more than it happens in animation. In terms of
Uh,
in animation, if you try to accumulate power through fear, it doesn't work that well. Most of the people on this list, if not all of them, are nice people, right?
uh,
This is, but in Hollywood, that's not, it's a totally different ball game.
isn't that so nice to hear? It's just like, well, it's a list of nice people. Quick question in here for
Yeah.
you, Amid. It's by Fallen Idol 9665. Will the list be available online as well, or will it only be in the print edition? Good question.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. The list is going to be online. It's going to go
Mm,
online sometime in late June or early July after the print publication comes out, but they'll be very
okay.
close to each other. So the print publication, you can't buy it. It's not for sale. It's going to be distributed to studios, to people on the list. At
Yeah.
an event in LA, it will be distributed. And it's also going to go to people who are annual members of the site as well. So everyone will be
Okay.
mailed an issue
Yeah.
who's an annual member. But the way print works is there's no business model of selling distribution for magazines and whatnot. It's almost impossible to. This is not something that we're doing to make money from, actually, which is
Mm.
probably not the best reason to
I
do
was
something.
about to say, yeah, it's
But
not
we're
the
doing.
best business model. Yeah,
No,
it's just
it's
like,
not.
here's free paper, everyone. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's also unlike I think a lot of magazines that you get and you're just like you look at it and you throw it away. This is going to be something that you're going to want to keep for a long time because it's actually you're it's basically like an annual yearbook for the animation industry
Mm.
of who's doing interesting work in the U.S. And who's kind of leading the industry. So and then our fall issue, which comes out in December, that's going to be our year in review and also our annual awards season issue,
Mm.
looking at films and shorts that are competing for awards at the end of the year, and also kind of taking a more nuanced look at everything that's been happened throughout the year in animation. So it's going to be twice a year, June and December, and then this is going to be every year from now on. So
Wow.
yeah,
I was going to ask about the fall edition, but you've basically explained it there. You have explained it, and
yeah.
none of these, you're never going to be able to pay for any of these, right? You're just publishing them every single time, or is it just this first launch you're going to do unpaid?
Oh no, it's always going to be free. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
we're trying to the hardest part with doing something for free if there needs to be some model behind it, and there are some ads in it, but I think there's far fewer ads in it than you're gonna see
Yeah.
in other publications. It's just basically enough so we don't lose too much money on it.
Okay. Okay. How do you
Yeah.
then? So the whole publication is going to be about this power list, right? This one that's coming in June.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to share it online after very close together, right? So how you said you're doing this in an event in LA. Is there anything else going on, or is that just the kind of launch of it?
No, that's it. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. All right.
we
Well, that's
can't
it.
do an event every week for it, but we're gonna do a
Yeah.
really nice reception for people who are on the list, and
Mhm.
it's gonna be a really I think it's gonna
What
be a really
about
special
in
event.
LA? Oh, sorry. Which date? Which date are you going to do it around?
Oh, we don't know yet. Yeah,
Oh,
it's gonna
okay.
be in late June or early July. That's basically there's a number of factors that uh
Hmm.
we can't actually lock a date yet, but it's gonna happen very soon. So
Yeah. So it'll be after Annecy, basically.
exactly. Yeah.
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 Um,
So speaking of Annecy, uh, let's look at this.
hey,
So
it's me.
Annecy's coming up. We're both going, but this is one of my favorite things that you've ever done. Is going to Annecy. I remember my first time was in. I'm old. It was 2004, I think, and
Wow.
yeah,
They just built the town. Yeah.
yeah, that old
No,
town, that medieval
that
town there, that was still new in 2004.
that was the
Yeah.
new town. Yeah.
The old
No,
town was
no.
the new. No, but it was only at that time there were only maybe 5,000 people there at the event, maybe
Okay.
less, maybe 4,000. Right? It was still a small event, and yet I remember being overwhelmed by you know being around 5,000 people in animation. I was like, this
Mm.
is insane, and it took me a few years to get a hang of it. So now today, if you go, it's a mob house. It's completely different than even then. Now it's like 3 to 4 times bigger than what it was in 2004.
Yeah.
So I asked you to make this video, and if you've
Hmm.
never been to Annecy, you absolutely have to see this. This would be the first thing you watch because I found it uh, even having been there many times, I found it such an amazing summary for a traveler who has not been to this festival of how do you kind of figure your way around there. Was what your first time at Annecy was when?
It says it in the thumbnail, 2022,
That was there. Okay.
which is, yeah. So this would be my third year going on this year. So that was like 2 years after COVID, which was kind of like the, I think everything was all like about the bubble of hiring after COVID was like that year. It was kind of the tail end of that. So everything was really big. But I remember you saying to me, because you commission interviews and then a video essay as well about someone going to Annecy, like what their experience is like. And I thought to myself, how am I going to do this? I have to really sit and think through my thoughts. And I had a camera with me, and I always regret I didn't get more footage. I relied a lot on the B roll that was provided by Annecy itself, which was fantastic. But trying to summarize the experience because it's so overwhelming, right? You go to this place where suddenly everyone is outside the studios. They're there to have a good time, to talk positively about animation, not in work where you're kind of seeing all the problems. You're now getting excited about these amazing things. And of course, they've got all these students who are so excited to get into the industry and talk about it. And there's this great energy that's there. And you're kind of like strapped into this uh, rocket ship of animation. You're just kind of being blasted along day by day. But at the same time, you see all these people who you admire and you've always wanted to talk to, and they're right there and they're so ready to talk to you. I think the way I summed it up was, it's as if you go to a music festival and then every night all the bands are walking around wherever you're hanging out and they're happy to talk to you, because that was the feeling that I got from it. And now I had a journalist pass, so I was kind of at all these after parties anyways. But the general consensus, because I remember people came up to me last year and were just like, "You're the guy who did that first time in Annecy video," and we're just like, they were like, "Are you going to do another one?" I was like, I can't really do another first time, but
My third time at Annecy.
yeah, my third time. I might think about it, but it obviously struck a chord with people because it is just like so overwhelming in a positive way, and it takes time to come down from that high. Like it's the potential of what the industry is, and distilled into one event. I would say, for me, anyways, for me, compared to other animation festivals I've been to. I'd be curious about your experience in your first time as well, Amid.
Yeah, I mean, again, that was so long ago that who knows what happened. But
Dust off the dusty archives there, yeah.
but I will say this is that um, I would say that if you try to look at the schedule and you try to do everything right, you're
Oh
going to
yeah.
end up disappointed. Annecy is not like one event; it's like 10 different animation events, and you have to find your own path. And you can't
Mm,
have FOMO of like I didn't see this or I didn't see that because you're not going to see everything. Even if you tried to see every screening and go to every party and talk to every single person, you couldn't do it, right? So it's
yeah.
better to just kind of give into the fact that you're going to have everyone's going to have their own personal experience from it.
Mm,
There's no universal Annecy experience. Some people I know, they go out on the lake every day with different people, right? And they get
yeah.
boats, and then they're not even really engaged in the festival that much. But that's one way that you can experience it. Other people are, at the bars all day. Other people are in the business side and having meetings all day. Some people are there to see the films. They want to see all
Yeah.
the features. And you can't, if you do that, then you can't see any other of the special programming. You can't see any of the shorts. Some people just want to see the shorts. I tend to, when I go there, I used to just try to watch the shorts, and now because of Cartoon Brew's growth, there's a lot more
Mm.
meetings, and some days, some years, I'll see one screening program, right? So
Wow. Yeah.
it's kind of, and then you're like, well, but I can see these films later too, but I can't see some of these people later, right? Like in person. I could travel all over the world, but they're all there, right? So you
Yes. Yeah.
prioritize the human connection with people. But yeah, I mean that's the you have to carve out your own experience, and I think that my experience personally over the last 20 years of going, not every year, but I've been more, at least 10 times. It's definitely changed. It's evolved into a
Mm.
different experience than what it initially was. So
I like what you say about choosing, like prioritizing the human connection, because that's really the power of it, right? It truly is, because everyone's there, right? Really, to some degree, most people are there, and they're so willing to talk to you because it's a week long festival, and you're there in the space of the festival every day, right? You're not at home. You're kind of on a holiday slash festival doing this thing, and people are. It's not a huge town, you know. People are eating in the same restaurants all the time. People are walking in the same spaces. You could have a business day, you could have a screening day, whatever it is. But I totally agree that when I was first there, the schedule was so overwhelming. I was just like, I don't know what to do. I actually don't know what to do. But I was so lucky I knew people who had been there before, and I kind of leaned very heavily on them as to what their flow of what to do would be. And then the second year I went last year, I kind of had a better rhythm of it. And hopefully this year I'll have again another rhythm of what to expect. Because I imagine this year for me will be more up the MIFA side, which is the business end, rather than down the artistic side, where I spent much more of my time the last 2 years. Because I never gave myself the time to explore that space. I would walk around it and be like, oh, that's cool, and then leave, you know? Whereas I was much more engaged with the content. Whereas it's such a good opportunity to network in its purest form, which is just talking to people, right?
yeah, yeah. And even the experience, I say, is different for everybody, but also the
Mm,
experience itself has changed. Like a lot of the stuff that you're
mm,
saying right now about, it's a great opportunity to meet people, and everyone's there. It was not the case in 2004, right? It was
mm,
very much an art festival, and
yeah.
today, the amount of people that go from LA is incredible. It has
Mm,
like blown up in the last 10 years, and it's become a very different event. But it but it's great to have people from like the industry in the U.S. showing up as well, and kind
yeah.
of having these interactions with the well, oftentimes they kind of stick together a little bit too much, but it's great when when people from the industry can connect the people from the indie world, and be
Mm,
exposed to what's happening on the independent side, the short film side, a lot of the more experimental work that's happening.
yeah.
So I think it's very healthy to have this mix of industry and independent filmmakers and business people, and it's just everyone's there. And this was not, it was very much an art, a film art festival back in the 2004. It was starting to change right around that time, but I feel like I
Mm.
experienced kind of a very different event when I first went than what I see nowadays. And both are amazing, both are valid. I'm just saying, it's not the same event.
Yeah, very different. And the studios put in a lot of money for this stuff because they always have tentpole events each one, whether it's like the Netflix party or the Disney barbecue or whatever it is. Like they have these huge events where they just invite everyone to. And it's like the event of that night, of Wednesday night or Thursday night or whatever night it is, like the Sony cocktail drinks, that kind of thing. So and I remember the first year I was there, Netflix had rented a boat. The second year they'd rented the whole castle up in the hill. So it's like they put a lot of money into this to showcase their work. It's really, really interesting, and which
Hmm.
means that they take it seriously, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't, again, like this was not, this is all recent, like I would say in the last decade,
Mm.
where we've had this kind of
What about
involvement
before
from the studios.
COVID?
I'm sorry, what?
What was what was it like before COVID?
It was exactly like you're explaining. Like I would say in the
Oh, okay.
last 10 years or so, studios have started to invest a lot more money into the event,
Hmm.
and that's a fairly recent development, but that's what the event is now. I haven't been since before COVID, so I can't
Mm.
say how it's changed, but I did go like every year up to that point. So
Yeah,
I'm going this year, and it'll be interesting to see
yeah.
what's new.
And you went through my eyes 2 years ago there in
Exactly.
that
I
video.
felt I felt like I was there. Again, if you haven't seen this video, it's amazing. Like if you've never been to Annecy and you're going for the first time, Cole, you did like such an amazing job of kind of condensing that huge experience into a very concise 10-minute film. And so, yeah, we're very proud to have that on the site.
Thank you. Thank you so
Um,
much. I appreciate it.
and
Um,
also,
yeah.
unless you have anything else to say about any closing
No, no,
thoughts on Annecy.
I've enough. I've talked about
Yeah.
myself enough now. Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about you more because you also interviewed Mark Dindal, whose new
I
film
did.
Garfield is coming out. This is going to be on In Between Animation next week, and we're just
Yeah.
kind of going through the things that are that there's a lot that we do that I think people don't always realize.
Mm.
And one of them is In Between Animation, which is the interview platform that we have for new filmmakers and show creators. And why is it called In Between Animation and not on Cartoon Brew? That's a really long story that I'm not even going to get into. But
Why did you
um,
bring up the question? How dare you? You can't tease the folks like this,
we would be here
you
for
know.
it.
And then
It was born out of the pandemic. Let's just put it that way. So
yeah.
there's a lot of weird stuff happening in
Why did you call
2020.
it in between with no syllables except for the I?
Yeah, it's just what you're supposed to do. No, like people in tech remove vowels. Like that's their number one enemy is vowels. So
Yeah. Well, okay.
so I don't
Yes,
know.
I
Yeah,
did
yeah.
talk
You
to Mark
you walk
Dindal,
into that
and it
one.
was a pleasure to talk to him. You know, he directed some incredible movies like Cats Don't Dance, Emperor's New Groove, what a classic, and of course Chicken Little. And he was out for his fourth film here, Garfield. Now, I was really curious to ask him what drew him to the film. And as we discussed in the interview, it was actually the script, the opportunity to tell a new facet of Garfield, because the script was already written and in the works. And if anyone hasn't seen the film, basically, even in the trailer, it kind of gives it away that he reconnects with his long lost father. His character has never been introduced ever before in the history of Garfield. Garfield, we've met his mother, but we've never met his father. And they kind of engage briefly into why you hadn't. And he also liked the idea of taking Garfield out of his circumstances in a comfortable circumstance to see how he would react, right? Because he felt that like interesting stories are bred from taking someone out of their comfort zone. And Garfield has only ever existed in his comfort zone. Let's be real. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a
So they were
domestic
part.
comedy.
It's a domestic comedy, yeah, about a cat who is very sarcastic, hates Mondays. Um, and what I found the most interesting to talk to Mark about is his approach to creativity. It just naturally comes up. I always drift slightly from what I talk about, as you know. I remember we had a great in between, very overlooked, I will say, with Richard Linklater about Apollo 10 and a half. And we discussed for a long time memory because
Wow.
he's so you're saying wow you should I can't
Well,
believe
I'm realizing that's probably why people didn't watch it. It's because
yeah because we talked about the film, but the film is about memory. It's Apollo 10 and a half is about looking back in your childhood, which is not, you're not in your own head. You're an unreliable narrator, really. Your memory does not serve you very well. And a lot of Richard Linklater's films are all about looking back on life and like those moments in your life and having these good memories. And so I really wanted to dig into that. Whereas I found with Mark Dindal, he always has this really strong sense of play with his films, especially. something like Emperor's New Groove, that film just felt like they were just, when you see the story put together, they were just being playful. There's literally parts in the movie where they address that this doesn't make sense, but we're gonna
Mm.
roll with it. They say to the, just for the just for the story, they're like, it doesn't make sense that we got back before they did, but here we are. Anyways, ignore that. Um, so it's like this idea of play, and how do you find that then? Because they were in development on this, or sorry, they'd start production during COVID. So how do you find a sense of play over Zoom? Right, very hard to do.
Right.
So a good portion, I'd say a good portion, the portion that I remember the most of the interview is um, talking about that idea of creativity and how to find that in something like Cats Don't Dance versus Garfield, right? And I thought that kind of stuff is really fascinating. You kind of really see behind the curtain in terms of not just the production itself, but in how a director approaches that production, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, like, Dindal as a choice for directing Garfield is a really interesting choice because we know him as a very comedic director.
Yeah.
And then Garfield's a comedy, but it's much more
Mm.
restrained, right? Like he has an
Mm.
expansive universe in Emperor's New Groove and in Cats Don't Dance, and in Garfield he was limited, and I see almost why he wanted to expand that because he likes you know he likes to play with the universe, and he
Mm.
doesn't have that. If you're just stuck in a house, right, that limits your ability
Yeah.
to explore and create scenes that you can't have big action scenes. I guess you could, but you don't see it too often, a big action scene in someone's
Mm.
small home, right? So
Unless you shrink it
I've
down
seen the
to like
film, and
Toy Story size, which
right.
is not happening here. But sorry, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean I've seen the film, and it's I think it's going to do well.
Really? Okay. Yeah.
It's a pretty fresh.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
shouldn't sound
Well,
surprised. Yeah. Yeah. Really?
no, but I mean it's already doing well, and I think it hits a lot of the right notes for families. There's
Mm.
and it's Garfield, but it's not like the hybrid films where there's anything like the character looks odd or anything. It's kind of the
Mm.
Garfield that we know and want to see. So it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be like Mario or anything where it's going to gross
Yeah.
$1 billion, but it's certainly a film that does what it sets out to do. And
Mm.
so, if you want
Well, what
Garfield,
was interesting as well is because I got to pick his brain a bit on the casting, right? Because if you, when that trailer that you have on loop there, you see right at the end, and this is a thing that seems to be with studios, right? Is the long announcement of casting, right?
mm-hmm.
This look at the prestigious cast that we have, and whereas you might listen to someone like Samuel L. Jackson as Chris Pratt's father, doesn't really sound like makes sense. So I was just like, okay, well, what was the casting choice, right? What it's not. I'm really really curious about it because Chris Pratt, obviously, he voiced Mario, he voiced Emmett in the Lego Movie, and now he's voicing Garfield here. So I was like, okay, just tell me a bit about the casting choice. Was that something to do with like studio pressure, or is it? Do you need big names to push this movie forward, or like how involved was he with the casting? And he said he was there from the start.
Wow.
They picked temp tracks from actors to see who would fit the characters best in their mind, which I found really, really interesting. And when they landed on Chris Pratt, they said, okay, for this version of Garfield, we really feel like he's the best voice for this character. And that's what he said for each and every one of them. And he didn't even realize who was in the film fully until he saw like the the sheet, the like press sheet, and he was like, "Wow, we got some huge talent in this film." Like he hadn't put it together that they were all in this.
Yeah.
Which I found really really funny.
I will say that the Samuel L. Jackson does not work.
Okay.
I mean, just to be honest, that was not a choice that works. It could have worked if you know if Garfield wasn't voiced by Chris Pratt, but it actually it's very distracting from
Really?
the actual storytelling, right? Because you're hearing Samuel L. Jackson and you're not really hearing Garfield's father, right? And there's
Mm,
just too much. There's too many things going on in your head where they're like this. Why does Garfield's dad, you know, sound like he's has a completely different? And I think I get what they were trying to do. Like Garfield's dad is rougher. He's a street cat, So
mhm,
let's
mhm.
put in Samuel L. Jackson there, right? And Garfield's domesticated, but it's a creative choice that is valid, but I don't think they quite nailed it with that. So
Interesting.
yeah,
But it's
but
also a
it's
thing of
interesting to hear
like,
your perspective. I mean, it's interesting to hear. I'm looking forward to listening to the whole interview with Mark
me too.
to see his insight. Because
Yeah.
as an artist, you make choices, and he has a valid reason for doing so. But also as an audience member, I thought it did not work very well. So
Hmm, hmm. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'm curious. I'd be curious to see how people react to hearing this kind of stuff. Because it's like respecting creative choices, right? You gotta. This is just what they go for. And not everything is gonna land the way people expect it. But it's always a interesting thing. I was found in the 2000s that like DreamWorks, in my opinion, seemed to lean more on prestige casting rather than the story driven voices, whereas Pixar always seemed to cast their voices very well, right?
mm-hmm.
Um, it felt like the character. But when I revisit those DreamWorks films now, I'm just like, nah, actually, I get this. I understand where it is.
Yeah,
Like, they're not trying to hide anything at all. Like, Will Ferrell as Megamind actually really, really works. At the time I was just like, okay, prestige casting. But now I'm like, oh yeah. Or Will Smith as that fish. It's just Will Smith. I can't remember the name. But it works for the story, and I have to kind of be a bit more forgiving in that as well. It's just because I recognize the voice.
yeah, and that's the thing is like even when I say I think the film's going to do well, I don't think it's going to
Uh,
hurt the film, right? It's just me personally watching the film.
yeah.
I didn't think it. I was thrown out of the story by the voice, and that's always a
Interesting. Yeah.
mistake when the voice takes precedence over the experience of being in that
Mm,
universe, right?
mm,
Um,
mm,
but like you say, it's been done before many times, and I don't think it's going to impact necessarily what people think of it. I think a lot of people are going to go, "Wow, this is great." Samuel L. Jackson
yeah.
is the voice of, and they're going to be like, "Oh, that's funny," right? So, I don't
Mm.
think it's going to negatively impact it, um, but
One
certainly,
last thing I'll
yeah.
touch on there is I because I asked him how much involvement Paws Inc., Jim Davis's corporation, would have had in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he said that Jim was totally open to all the choices. Like, absolutely, there you go. That's his father. He was excited to bring a new character into the universe, and they were very, very supportive, which I thought was lovely. That's
That's
all.
great.
Yeah, really nice to
Was
hear
he
because
involved? Was he involved in the project in any way? Was he just kind of stamping, the choices, or did he have any creative input into the project? Jim Davis, the
I
creator.
can't remember. I don't think necessarily he did. I'm not. I can't really remember. I need to go back and listen to my own interview, but it'll all become clear when this interview comes.
Yes,
I think it was
maybe
more
next week.
stamping, to
Yeah,
be honest.
I'm
Yeah,
also curious. How old? I mean, how old is Jim Davis? I mean, I don't know why he would
Jim
be
Davis is in his
80s.
60s,
No,
70s.
no.
I love you just googling it
Yeah,
now.
I don't know. I don't.
78. Wow, nearly 80.
Is he
Oh my
78?
gosh.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because Garfield was a purely commercial character, right? He was designed to be commercial. Everything about Garfield was designed to be commercial. There were so many dogs. So he was like, "How about a cat? How about a sarcastic cat?" Even the way they designed the bucks, it wasn't like a portrait. They were landscapes, so they were forced to put them at the start of the bookshelf or the end, like either a tail end, and that's the
Mm.
first place people look. So it's like they got really good retail space with that single decision to print the books that way because all the bookstores were forced to put it there. They couldn't have it sticking out the middle like that, you know? So everything about Garfield was originally designed to be commercial. His first design is really interesting. The very first design looks far more like the hybrid Garfields than the kind of current Garfield style now, when it was like reiterated on and reiterated on. Whereas like the movie now looks far closer to the Garfields that we know. And Garfield is a character that, you know, kids would learn to draw very early on. It's a very simple shape. Same like Sonic. Sonic or Garfield, they're two very impressionable characters, their color choices, their shapes, very simple, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for simplicity. You know, SpongeBob is a
Mm.
box. You know, small
SpongeBob,
box.
yeah,
Garfield is, you know, shapes are
an orange
a couple
ball,
circles,
yeah,
and but he is very
yeah.
easy to draw, and that I wonder if that, you know, helps in the popularity of it. I mean, popular characters in the past, like Bugs Bunny, like they're some of them are really hard to draw, right? So it's like, I guess it doesn't
Mm.
mean anything, but Garfield is a
Well, it
very
means something
simple
to the
design.
people who yeah, who it imprints on, right? If you're drawing someone like Garfield early on in your life, you're going to have good memories of that kind of thing, you know, as the first character that you draw. I think in that way, it's just genius. Everything about Garfield is really genius. All the decisions that Jim Davis went through, it's very, very smart.
Yeah. Let's move on to one final topic. This is not the most fun topic.
Of course,
we always
you're
always
bread
end
and
on a
butter here.
downer. We always try
Yeah.
to find what's the most depressing topic that we can end this show on. And I think this week it was this video, but it's actually I think it's a great video, right?
Mm.
It's a great video. The topic isn't super jolly, but it's a very. I was super impressed with how this video was put together. So basically, there's an industry artist, Zach Mulligan, and
Hmm.
he summarizes everything that's been happening in the animation industry for the past year and a half, especially in the LA animation industry. And he does
Yeah.
this wonderful kind of breakdown of why everyone is out of work right now, and not everyone is,
Mm.
but there's a way more people out of work than there should be, and you know why is that, and what's going to happen after this? Well, the thing is, no one knows what's going to happen after this, but certainly
Mm.
to understand what's happening in this moment, this is a really fantastic video.
Yeah, I watched it. I was really impressed. You know, not only is it really well presented, but it's very easy to watch. Right? It's very all the information is laid out very well. It's very snappy at the start. Really draws you in. You know, 5 reasons. Everything's about the breakdown, and I'm about to tell you exactly why. Like from a purely editorial thing, with someone who makes video essays, I love this kind of style. And know the robot is his handle on YouTube, right? Um, and really, really good stuff. But it the best thing about it is it's so modern, right? It really pulls. It's not something like I do, which is looking at the past, but it's something so current from someone who knows exactly what they're talking about as well, and is laid it out so succinctly. The video is like 24 minutes. It doesn't feel like that at all. You kind of get totally sucked in. And he makes some really good points about like the gold rush of the streaming services, you know, how the massive layoffs affected everything. Oh, you've written it all out there.
Yeah,
The
well, I'm going.
layoffs.
You can
Yeah.
read it off. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I mean,
All
yeah,
the
the
all the
layoffs and
outsourcing,
yeah,
you know, everything like that. Um, the merging and acquisitions, and a huge thing for everyone else, which is of course AI, generative AI, which is I don't know. I'm going to verge to AI for a second, so bear with my brain train here. I'm in such two minds about it. I'm totally in agreement of the thievery of AI in terms of how the models are trained. Right, I don't agree with that, but I also see true artists starting to bend AI in really interesting ways. There's a Turkish artist called Refik Anadol who does these insanely beautiful, um, like he calls them dreams of machines, right? Where he pulls AI in, and he'll and his work is shown in art galleries, and it's like this beautiful um, mapping of how the AI is trained and how it throws it back out. It's stunning. I can't describe it enough. And that's someone where I'm just like, okay, they're using AI in a very different way. Whereas we're all worried that AI is coming to steal and shorten things, which it is, right? Because it can do motion control. There's companies out there that are just saying, hey, plug your animated character into this and just type what you wanted to do and it'll do it, right? Which is taking away the very source of animation. But I've got to say, Zach here, he really outlines it so well. Specifically, like the bubble that led to the layoffs, then, right? And how the companies then are trying to cut costs all the way down.
No, I want to. I mean, I want to follow up on what you were just talking about, though, about AI. Like, yeah, if
Yeah.
you're an artist, you're going to be excited about a new tool that comes along that allows you to change, how you approach your art, right? If you're a
Mm.
business person, you're going to be looking at AI as how can I cut costs and get rid of these artists. But then if you're an
Mm.
industry artist, I can understand you're going to be conflicted because you might have some interest in learning AI and seeing what it can do, but at the same time, that your bosses are actively looking at the same thing and looking to replace you, right? So I can
Yeah.
completely understand why if you're an industry artist, even if you have like this conflicted idea of I like it, at the end of the day, you're not going to be for it because that there's your immediate supervisors are looking to replace you with this very technology. So
Mm.
it's very easy to understand why there's so many people are conflicted about it, and it's
Yeah.
also easy to understand why if you're an artist who works in the industry and you are a commercial artist who works in
Mm.
animation, you should it's not you should not be, but you would likely not be for AI at this point. Now,
Mm.
what about some later point? Well, at some later point, I really do think it is going to be, one of the things that Zach talks about in this video is that survey that was done by the co-commissioned by the Animation Guild, and
Mm.
they found that the AI is going to replace hundreds of thousands of jobs in the film and television industry over the coming decades. So actually,
Yeah.
they have a timeline that's a little even more uh, serious. They're like in the next 3 to 5 years. I don't quite necessarily think that's going to happen, but they were they commissioned the
Yeah.
survey and they're going to get the results that they need. But I do
I
think
think it would be that fast. I mean, to be honest, I
you
do. It
you really
moves
think
very
people in the
fast.
next 3 years are going to be replaced by AI.
Well, 3 years ago, the industry looked very different to now.
Yeah.
AI wasn't even part of the conversation, and now it's a big part. I
But but
do
but
think so. It's going to happen very fast.
so
Yeah.
but a lot of the reason it's in the conversation is hype, right? It's not real.
Mm.
I mean, if you look at what they're actually doing with AI, I mean, so I think what a lot of people maybe don't necessarily grasp is, yeah, if you're looking at AI as output, like this is the creative output, you're going to get some really shoddy results. But if you're looking at
Mm.
AI as part of a pipeline, like can it help rig a character or can it do this or
Yeah.
that, like mundane tasks that are not final would appear on the screen, but they're part of the workflow. I do
Hmm.
think it's going to become more of a workflow tool than it is a final creative output tool. At least initially, it's going to take years until what you're seeing actually like will equal a Hollywood blockbuster. You're not going
Mm.
to get Dune 2 just by AI, right? You're gonna have to you're gonna
Well, you'd have to train it on Dune 2 to get it.
right,
That's the
right.
thing, right?
No, but I'm
You have
saying
to create these things.
it's not a tool for final output at this moment. It's more of a workflow tool, and so in that sense, I think you're correct. It is going to replace a lot of industry
Mm.
workers for that reason. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I think the other really interesting thing about this video is that we have these first four reasons, right? And the streaming bubble and layoffs and outsourcing, mergers and acquisitions, all this stuff. That's all bad on its own. And then AI seems like it's in its own completely, like it's a completely different kind of bad that's not even related to business. But I also wonder how much of that is like how much of what's happening is because of the sense that, over the, is there any commonality between this? Did AI maybe create some of this
Interesting
interest in
question.
Hollywood
Yeah.
to downsize and to start looking at new ways of doing things? And not that they figured it out, but are they?
Yeah.
Is this connected, or are these just? Is this just two really crazy things happening? A pandemic, then bad business decisions, and then AI on top of it. I don't know. This is a question, and it would be interesting to hear what
I'd be
others
curious to,
think about that.
yeah, if anyone in the chat has anything to kind of put in about AI or even about what you were just saying, because that's a really great question. In my head, I'd answer it as they seem like two different things, but they eventually are going to start becoming one, right? I don't
Mm,
think the outsourcing is necessarily been because a company over in India has an AI program that does it for them, right? It's just lower costs. Um, and the layoffs, it seemed to be because they just hired too many people because they're expecting a bubble. Like he so brilliantly puts out, the streaming services were a gold rush. And there's not as much gold in those tunnels as they thought there were
yeah.
because of the way that the streaming services operate, right? It's one pot of gold that goes to everything. Um, but, and I said this to you before, one thing that I found so interesting throughout that conversation was how Illumination Studios seems to be like the success story out of all these big studios, right? Everyone else is laying off people all the time, whereas Illumination just seems to be going from strength to strength recently. I mean, the rise of Gru, nobody was expecting that to do as well as it did. Um, and then Super Mario did even better than I ever thought it would ever do, you know? Um, and of course, they had things like Migration. I'm not sure how well that did,
That did
but
quite
now
well
they've
for
got this.
for an original film.
Did it really?
I mean, it didn't do crazy numbers, but it did
Yeah.
numbers that justified the fact. It's a modest hit.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then you've got Despicable Me 4 on the way as well, which is like feeds into that minion loving world that people have. Um, and I'd said to you before that, like, I think their strength is really into franchises, but you had mentioned their business model.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I do think it is partly franchises, but it's also behind the scenes. A lot of the corporate decisions that they make are just smart. I mean, one of them is when you're successful with something, studios always say, "Oh, we're going to start making 2 to 3 films a year as soon as one of their films is a hit." And Illumination has been
Yeah.
like, it all runs through Meledandri, Chris Meledandri, who runs the company. It all runs
Mm.
through him at the top, and he's one person, so he can't. He's been very smart about not trying to. Oh, I have a big success, and I'm going to make even more, and because that's what immediately what companies do. But he's like,
Bubbling.
we have a
Yeah.
process, and we're going to do it consistently, and we're not going to like try to make 3 films a year or something just because because he realizes also, I think there's diminishing returns if you make more of
Mm.
something that people like, so it's just every decision that he makes from the top seems to be very well considered and kind of very pragmatic. And
Yeah.
I think there's it sounds like really obvious stuff too. Like if I was running a company, I think this is, these are basic things that make sense, right? But somehow they don't make sense to the rest of Hollywood. And so this is he's actually doing
Yeah.
something unique just by being logical, right?
Well, that's so interesting because it's like, this is something I will probably lose everyone listening now as I go on in a 2 minute uh, explanation of my thought process. But this is something that you see with kind of the stock market of something like Costco versus General Electric or something, right? Back in the day. Whereas if you zoom in uh, on something like Costco, it just seems like they're just flat, right? But if you zoom out, there's a long, a very steady growth. Whereas if you looked at something like General Electric under Jack Welch, I think it was, it's just like up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. So you're getting these high returns, and then it drops immediately. But they're like, oh, we need to get it back up. And they're so focused on the short term that they don't think about the long term thinking, right? Like you're saying there, one success equals, oh, everyone must love our stuff. So let's put out three of these. Let's just keep it going. Whereas that's exactly what happened to all the streaming services where they created a bubble and made promises to people that they couldn't keep because they weren't aware of the return. And now you've got loads of people losing their jobs and they're trying to save money by outsourcing. And this kind of idea of over promising, like chasing the bottom line, is never a safe bet. Whereas, like you said, Melandandre, that kind of very consistent growth, right? Just keeping on that track and focusing on just pulling it up, like we said before, 1% every time, just keep it going consistent, really is the best way to grow ultimately, because business is an infinite game, right? There's no agreed upon rules. You can't win at business. You just stay in business for as long as possible. The only way you lose is by, merging or dropping out. You're either bought or you close your business. That's really it. Apart from that, you're still winning by playing. Do you know what I mean? You just
Yeah.
stay in it as long as possible. You can't win at marriage. You can't win at business. These are infinite games. And people don't really realize that when they start businesses. They say to themselves, we're going to be we're going to be the number one business. We're going to be the number one animation studio in the world. And it's like, what does that even mean? Who's drawing these metrics that you define yourself by? And rather than thinking to yourself, I'm going to try stay in business for as long as possible. And that's a very different approach.
Yeah, the problem is when you have a quarterly shareholders meeting, right?
Yeah, I know,
It's
right?
hard to stay. It's hard to tell shareholders, yeah, we're growing consistently at 3 to 4% a year, right? So there's always
Yeah.
that pressure to have, and I think Pixar was a very different studio before the Disney buyout than after, just in
Mm,
terms of their pipeline, in terms of the pressure on them to perform, and it eventually, I don't want to say it collapsed, but the whole kind of brilliance of that model that they had. If you remember in the early 2000s, they had all these films like,
yeah.
Wally, and these came out after the Disney merger, but they were still, pre, the pre Disney
Hmm.
merger. It was Wally and Ratatouille, and just everything they did, everything they did seemed, like right. And then it just, the pressure got to them, and now they've kind of readjusted course, and they're trying to figure things out, kind of second kind of age of the studio.
Yeah.
But when big companies come in, and when they have to deliver to shareholders, things usually happen. I think another great
Mm,
example, I would love to see somebody write this for us. I would even commission a piece, would be the Lego movie franchise, how that collapsed
yes.
overnight.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers made it their whole business model. Like, this is just bad management. But they said, oh, we had one great Lego film. Let's just make more Lego films. And I'm sure there was a plan anyway to do this even before that Lego movie was a success. But immediately every film started doing worse and worse and worse, to the point where they had to cancel a number of the Lego films because they just realized, like,
Mm,
no one's coming to see this. But you can't build a model on, we made one great film and now we're just going to put, like three of them into theaters in a 2 year time span. That's
mm,
not how, that's not, that's how the business mind works, where they're like growth oriented and we got to make more money, but it's not actually a smart model. So
mm,
Meladandri's genius is really, I think, on the creating a product that people like, but then understanding how to promote that product, how to deliver that product, when to put it out there. He does everything right, and
yeah.
and that's just, it sounds obvious, but it's rare. It does not happen very often.
Rare. Yeah. That's so good. Yeah. Well done, Chris. Keep
Yeah.
going. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, and when you and when we're doing the power list, and I think people will be interested to see what placement he's achieved on that. So
Yeah. Don't
it'll
give
be
it away.
interesting. No,
Yeah.
I'm not giving it away.
61.
There
Yeah.
you
Nobody. He's not, he didn't make it.
go. So yeah, but that's yeah, that's it for
Mm,
this week. I think there's a lot there's a lot more to be said about this, and I think we're going to say in the coming weeks, as we
about the powerless.
digest
Yeah,
this everything that's happening right now. It's an ongoing story. So the industry is kind of experiencing some turbulence, but
yeah,
um,
yeah.
I think we'll come out on the other side of it once these union negotiations are done this year, which he talked a lot about in the video towards the end. Uh, I
Hmm.
I hope the industry will emerge stronger. The LA industry will emerge stronger than before. But there certainly are a lot of challenges ahead.
Yeah, it's going to be turbulent, I think, for a bit of time, anyways. But the good thing is, people still want movies. There's people every year still wanting to see new things. So that's a very good thing, and studios haven't forgotten that. I mean, they need to keep creating in order for them to survive. So it will happen, even if it does slow down. They're still going to be putting out movies, so that's a good sign
Very good. Okay,
to end
cool.
on instead of your miserable.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah,
positive
yeah,
ending to the week. That's great.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
we always trick you. We're like, we're going to talk about something depressing, but then we bring it back around to something positive.
You always trick me. You always trick me. I just like, well, I shouldn't be tricked by the depressing stories, but no, I would recommend that anyone watch that video. It's a really great summary of what's going on, and it's not all doom and gloom, like you say. He leaves it on a lovely note as well.
Okay. Well, thank you, Cole. I hope you have a great evening over there, and hope you have a great
Thank you.
weekend. Thank you, listeners, for joining in.
Hmm.
We're gonna try to do a better job of kind of explaining the topics that we're going to talk about earlier in the week, so people have a sense of what the live stream is going to be about. But we're still figuring things out. But so
Yeah.
getting
So
better.
thanks for joining us, guys.
But
Yeah.
thank you, Cole, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Yeah. I'll talk to you later, guys. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody.